Good morning.
Oh, such a good morning. It's cold, but it's beautiful. And during winter, or close to winter, when you see a beautiful blue sky with no clouds, you have to leave home with a heavy jacket because it's cold. So today we're going to have Joe, and he's going to be presenting to us the lecture that is developing strength to maintain. Oh, in the future. So it's developing the strength to maintain hope in the future. So he's talking about future. Is he really? So let's hear and let's see what's happening. We're gonna do our initial prayer. From the book Happy Life from Givaldo and Joanna de Angelis. The opportunities for moral improvement that life allows us should be taken advantage of wisely and immediately. The march of time is inevitable, and an occasion neglected is lost forever. Time and wind never come back. Thus, it is liberating blessing to utilize every opportunity for inner growth. Stay alert in order to take the most advantage of the hours of your earthly existence. Wow, such a good message for today's lecture. So let's close our eyes and think of God and embrace Jesus in our hearts and in our soul. And ask Jesus to bless this day, to give us hope and strength today, to give us clarity of mind to Joe and to all of us to understand through Spiritism the blessings that we have today and everything else that we need to still work in every day of our lives. So this hope and this strength keep coming and keep growing in us. With that, we say thank you. Thank you, Joe, and welcome.
So, my turn to say good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sure that everyone here can already smell the feijoada that's coming up. And I'm sure that will help you concentrate in what I'm going to say, because you're hoping for a very near future to be able to go in and eat the feijoada. For those who are watching us online, welcome. Good morning to you, or good afternoon, depending where you are. Glad to have you here. So as Sandra very nicely didn't remember, the lecture is about developing the strength to maintain hope in the future. Just by looking at the title, you would think, well, that's not a very spiritist topic, is it? I mean, it seems very agnostic. Everybody will have a future, and right? And some people have hope, others don't have hope. But interesting enough, it is a topic that covers many themes or principles that we discuss in Spiritism. Just to give a few, I could talk about predestination, talk about reincarnation, cause and effect, trials and tribulations, life's vicissitudes, law of progress, planetary evolution. I'm not sure you guys understand how we come up with these things. We have a coordinator, Rafael. He's not here today, but thank you, Rafael, for giving me enough material to talk until Christmas. So I hope you're not that hungry, because the feijoada is going to take a little while. Well, of course, I'm joking. We have to keep this honest and short, because we have to focus in exactly what is the essence of hope and why the future should concern us. So I will focus more right now for this lecture on the law of progress, reincarnation, trials and tribulations, and vicissitudes. to explore this fascinating topic. Question: we use the word vicissitudes a lot in Spiritism. We know what it means. How is it different from the trials and tribulations? Well, vicissitudes actually means change, the ups and downs that we have in life. And of course, we all experience this. Nobody has a perfect life where everything is just blue skies like we have today. Snow will come, rain will come, the wind. So is our life. We'll have good days, we'll have not so good days, and eventually we'll have very bad days. For many different reasons, we can be one of health, death, financial problems, relationship problems. A lot of things can and will come across to our lives because that's part of the process of why we incarnate in the first place. So for the purpose of today, I will focus on a few books that Rafael referred to, and Sandra also helped me over the last few days. And this will be the Gospel According to Spiritism, as we always bring it in, chapters 3 and 4. Genesis. How many people have read Genesis here? Always a little minority, because everybody thinks it's a hard book, but it's not a hard book to read. And it's interesting because it's the last of the 5 books the codifier created or prepared for us. It was the last one, 1858, actually not too long before his death. And if you think about it, that's 170 years almost ago. So it's been a while. So as we think about this, let's focus on Kardec. Let's focus on what he was living, his experience as the second half of the 19th century. So he started writing, codifying the first book. The first book was 1854. And he only lasted for, he only stayed incarnated for about 15 years. So it was a very short period, and he gave us not only the 5 books, but much more other material that was used in the Spirits magazine and other famous letters and things that were published after his death. But it was a fascinating time to be alive. The world had experienced about 100 years of the Industrial Revolution. Was substantial change in the world, especially France. France was leading a lot of this, and so was England, and to a lesser extent, the US towards the latter part of the 19th century. The whole means of production, wealth, jobs were changing from rural activities to the cities. Thousands of jobs were created in the factories. But with it, this rapid transformation. So we had thousands of years of doing basically agriculture and commerce, and suddenly we had factories. It came with a lot of benefits, but more importantly, it came with a lot of challenges. This was a time of great thinking. Dickens was publishing as well The Tale of Two Cities, which talks about this transformation of how suddenly people were thrown into cities and had to learn new ways of life. It was also the time of Darwin, right? Right after the publishing of this first book came The Theory of Evolution by Darwin. Electromagnetism, electricity, all of these things were being discovered. So it was exciting. It was a time to be optimistic, but at the same time to take a hard look at some of the challenges that came with it. And Kardec was fully aware of that, right? He was living in Paris. He was well connected with the more intellectual circles in Paris. And he obviously put some of that thought into what he wrote. So in many of the 5 books, there are parts that are coming directly from the spirits, through communications that were made by mediums who Kardec documented. Remember, Kardec was not a medium per se. He was not receiving himself those messages. He was the editor, if you may. But of course, as any editor, if anybody has done any editing here, you always put in a lot of your perspective into this. So what was, excuse me, what were some of the challenges that were becoming very evident? One was child labor. Suddenly, we always had child labor up to that point because children were put to work on the farm in very early age. But they were working with the family within a certain schedule, within a certain arrangement that was well understood. But suddenly in factories, it was discovered that they were particularly good at doing some things that adults weren't as able to do. So a very large number of children were being put to work, not like in the farm, where you typically would work early mornings up to feeding the animals and whatever. They were working 14, 16 hours a day. Right, and we're talking children as early as young as 10 years old, or even younger, depending on the situation. And this was becoming very scandalous because the profit that was being made by the owners of these factories were on the back of these small children. And they had no protection. There were a lot of accidents. Obviously, children are not necessarily very conscious of what they might be doing. So it was really a big problem that they had to deal with. The industrialization started then to create a new concentration of wealth. Now, let's not be naive to think that there wasn't concentration of wealth before. It was first done by force, by kings and lords that use armies to obtain wealth, land, and exploit the people in the fields. Then was the merchants who also would use their wealth. But suddenly, this kind of really accelerated to the industrialization. You have the new barons coming in, creating great inequalities. And most of all, they continue the model that wealth was being generated by the suffering of those who actually did the work, created social unrest, socialism, eventually communism, and this was all being kind of born at really coming to service around the time that Kardec was giving us Spiritism. With it also came other things. Immigration, right, was started. They had to bring in workers from other countries, from the colonies. Imperialism was at this very high peak. The great British Empire, right? The Spanish Empire had already kind of decimated, but still there were a lot of colonies that they could bring people to work, almost like semi-slaves. But this created conflicts of the locals versus the new immigrants. And with it, a lot of racial tension, because you would bring in folks from the Southeast Asia or Africa, which were a lot of the colonies. So we still rising of this racism really become blatant. Nationalism then comes next, right? People wanted to defend their borders. There was a lot of power struggles in Europe as countries were becoming stronger, wealthier, some more than others. And then nationalism was used as a tool to rally populations to make these countries somehow stronger. The wealth disparity exploded, and xenophobia, right, was blatant. Now, I was reading this and I thought, well, did I just get into thread by mistake? Because these are the same issues that we see today. Well, another thing that I forgot to mention is part of the urbanization created great health issues, right? Public health was in the dumps, a lot of diseases, pollution everywhere. London was described a place of basically two things: horse manure and smoke, right? Because everything was done with carbon, right? Coal. Now, Kardec was the ever optimist, right? And where this really shows is in the last chapter of the Genesis. So it's the last chapter of the codification books. And where he talks about the future, and he calls that chapter Signs of Times. Now, that term wasn't used for the first time by Kardec, right? There's always been this notion of sign of times, where there's this sense that whatever God you believe in was giving you signs that things were going to change. And typically, with a few exceptions, these signs were of a better time, right? That things were going to change for the better, that whatever you were experiencing at that point would become kind of surpassed, right? So Kardec brings a lot of that optimism into chapter 18 as well. And some of the spirits that he has also quoted kind of share this idea. Now, what is different about the Spiritist view of the future versus what other religions might think? If you kind of try to bring it into simplicity, most religions are about existence, existentialism, right? About why we exist and why do we serve God. In some different ways, every religion has a different interpretation of how that works, and basically that this is our chance to prove ourselves to a God and to merit or to deserve an eternity based on our behavior and the things we do. And those thoughts, those principles were not bad, because it really created a lot of the initial seeds of civilization. Because if you didn't believe that there is a reason for you for being good, for doing the right thing, then maybe many people say, why is it worth? I'm going to take what I can. I'm going to take pleasures, wealth. I'm going to take revenge. I'm going to do all of these things now while I'm alive. Because guess what? I'm going to die maybe before I reach 60, or if I'm lucky. And that's it. So why should I waste the days I have today? So religions were positive in the way that it created a purpose for being good. Again, I don't want to say that people would not be good if there wasn't religion. That's not the point. But as a whole, as a societal motivator, it worked, right? And we saw great progress. But Spiritism is a bit different. The essence of Spiritism is about evolution. It's an evolutionary doctrine, because it, as one of the fundamental tenets, is that everything moves, progresses, evolves, from biology to ecology to planets to us. And in order for that to make some sense, it couldn't be in a single life, right? Because every person has a different lifespan. Some may have a lifespan of hours or days. Others can go to 100, 112 years old. But that's still but a blink in the bigger picture of eternity. So this is where reincarnation plays a big role in understanding the cycle of evolution of us as spirits, as society, as a community of spirits, and the universe itself. If we agree with the Big Bang, which was kind of a beginning of this particular existence of the universe, everything is moving. It never stays stagnant, but it has to have a purpose, a direction. And Spiritism tells us that that purpose is to perfect ourselves. But we won't do it in one life. In fact, we've had many lives. So before we go back to talking about the future, let's talk about the present. How do we get here? Well, you can say it was our ancestors and all of the decisions they made that got us here, right? All of these past generations of spirits that came, they made good decisions, they made bad decisions, they accomplished things, they developed scientific progress, they created philosophy as kind of principles of good behavior in society. And that's how we got here. Yeah, that's fair, but you're forgetting one thing. We were part of that experience. We were there in previous lives. So where we are today, we're responsible for it. Now, every generation is growing the population, so there's more spirits. So not every spirit experienced or lived the same number of lives and had the same responsibility. But in essence, as a group, everyone who's alive here, who's incarnated right now, I can assure you is not their first incarnation. So to some extent, we have all been architects of where we have the path that we have taken and how we have reached here. So what does that mean? We are the architects of the future as well. So what's going to happen in the future, where us as spirits, us as maybe a familial unit, or us as a society, where we're going depends on what we're doing today. We're trailing. We're creating those trails. And this is what's so important to understand and make sure that we're not here just to please God and doing the right thing. We're here because we are workers, as Jesus has described us, of a field that's planting the seeds of fruits and seeds and grains that we'll harvest in the future. And for that, we have to learn how to prepare ourselves, how to help others. Because one spirit in 8 billion or more that might come, right, needs to come together in order to create this momentum. So Kardec understood this. And I'll talk about, I'm going to quote a couple of passages from this chapter so you understand. So in chapter 18, item 5, he describes up to now, humankind has made incontestable progress. And we have to agree, looking back 2, 3, 4,000 years. Due to their intelligence, humans have achieved results never reached before regarding the science, arts, and material well-being. There's much progress yet to be made. They have yet to make charity, fraternity, and solidarity reign amongst them in order to assure their moral well-being. All right, so this goes back to what we described often here, the two wings of a dove flying, the intelligence, the knowledge, the science versus the morality, the kindness, the charity. But Kardec was a bit over-optimistic in the timing when he was writing this, right? Because he understood that there was a change of kind of leadership, right? One generation leaving, and he was looking back in his world, right? Maybe the generation that was coming out of the Renaissance into the industrial age, and now going into a future yet to be described. So he felt that there was quick change that's going to come with a new generation. So he talked about new generation. So we think we talk about generations as something new, like, started in the 70s with the Aquarius generation. No, there was always discussion of generation. But he felt the generation was not just between families or small groups, but the whole humanity. So he keeps saying that this time, however, it will not entail a partial change, a renewal limited to a certain area, people, or race. It will be a universal movement that will operate in the sense of moral progress. So he was optimistic. He felt that Spiritism, and he really kind of obviously felt that every cell of his being understood the importance of what Spiritism was saying and how this could transform society. So he was hoping that like kind of an explosion, this idea, these thoughts would go across all of the societies and that. But he keeps saying, when you hear that humankind has arrived at a period of transformation and that Earth must ascend within the world hierarchy, do not see anything mystical in these words. but to the contrary, the fulfillment of one of the greatest unavoidable laws of the universe, against which all humans ill will shall break. So he is reinforcing the idea of the law of progress. You cannot stop progress. Progress will occur. It is in God's plan for this to take place. So why not embrace it now? Why not join the movement, the transformation, and not wait for another 1,000 years, but get on board now? And here's what I felt that he was really trying to look at this with rose glass eyes. Today, humankind is mature enough to set its sights higher than it ever has in order to simulate broader ideas and to comprehend what it did not comprehend before. The generation that disappears, so the old generation, will take its errors and prejudice with it. The generation that emerges, immersed in a pure source of imbued with more sound ideas, will imprint on the world an ascendant movement in the sense of moral progress, which will signal the new phase of humankind. The current generation will disappear gradually, and the new one will follow in the same way, without there having been any change in the natural order. The present age is one of transition. The members of both generations are mixed together. Standing in the midpoint, we're watching, so he's thinking in the midpoint, watching the departure of one and the arrival of the other. And each is already distinguishable by the characteristics that are proper to it. So this is 1868. What he didn't realize is that what is the thing that we can most relate about change? What do we learn in business school or in courses? Nobody likes change. People resist change. They fear change, especially those who are benefiting from the status quo. And they, because they have influence, they have money or power or whatever, whether it be moral influence through churches, religions, political power, economical power, military power, they don't want to give up because they feel that change will inevitably help others. If somebody's being helped, that means that they must be in the negative side of this equation. So what happened after Kardec discarnates? We have conflicts, ultimately leading a few years later, maybe 40 years later or less, I do the math, 40 years later, World War I breaks up because of politics, because of military conflicts. The world is thrown into chaos with a war it had never seen before. Before, wars were very localized between superpowers, you may say, or between tribes or other groups. Now suddenly the world, or at least the civilized world, what they call the civilized world, that's questionable, but Europe in particular, and the US, and then eventually other countries, get put into this terrible war, right? Where all of those negative things that Kardec was hoping was going away are used as tools to bring countries against each other. Imperialism, economical power, xenophobia, nationalism. These are all the ingredients to bring on hatred and to bring on death. So if I had asked, does Kardec need strength to have hope in the future? He had lots of strength. He had great hope. And he saw just a clear path moving forward because he knew the strength is not necessarily in just what we're seeing, but in the faith that Spiritism, and what it describes, I mean, Spiritism is a science, is one thing, or as a philosophy, but what it describes in terms of the purpose of the universe and what God has given to us, it seems clear. This can be no different, that what we're expected to do is to move forward in this way. So he had all the hope. If he was still alive, couple of decades later, he would have been frustrated, right? In terms of the missed opportunity. But here's where our faith kicks in. Against all odds, against all of the misery, suffering, kind of negative lack of hope that must have existed, and I can't even start to think of how it would have been living in those times, that people might have thought that this was the end, that there was no salvation. Society came through. And out of it, the first steps towards bringing what used to be a very regional world, and now is becoming a more globalized world, into some kind of new order, right? With the treaties and so forth, far from perfect. And maybe the seed of many of the problems we're facing today, but it was still a much needed improvement from those years at war. But unfortunately, at the same time, especially in the US, greed and excesses took over, right? The need to punish Germany started to create the seeds of what would become World War II. So what was thought to be the Great War and the last war, they obviously didn't call it World War I at the time. The Great War, which was supposed the last of such wars, because now we understand, we got the memo, we know that this is bad, we're not going to do this again, comes very strong again, using racism, using the idea of pure race, of imperial conquest, and the need to kind of obtain resources and wealth. Greed eventually led us to World War II. Again, how can we keep the strength of hope? How can we see a new light on the other side? It took a long time. But then, and this is where we have to have faith in God's plan, we came through. Moments were very close. There might have been chances that it might have not ended at that point. It could have continued to different paths, but it did not. And after that, let's put aside some of the other kind of more regional battles that occur, and even the Cold War, which was basically the new realignment of powers across the globe. We went into a period of progress, somewhat equilibrium, balance, peace, right? And great social evolution. Some of those issues that were there that I described in terms of ecology, right? Racism and so forth, there were new waves, new fronts to try to find better ways to resolve those problems. Resolve the inequalities that existed, the racism. Countries opened up their economy, opened up their borders to immigrants. Canada is a great example of that. I was just thinking the other day that when I first moved to Canada, there was this kind of immigration wave of people from Vietnam. I don't know how many people here were here at the time. And it was a little bit controversial at the time, because with it came a large number of refugees. There were issues around gangs forming of these people who had not yet incorporated. And, people were afraid. But now looking, I see how many Vietnamese are fully integrated to our society. They own businesses, restaurants, real estate. Nobody talks about it anymore because it's not a problem. So we saw, again, hope prospect that things are getting better. And then the 80s came, and greed took over again. And then that has been kind of growing as we see again the accumulation of great wealth. Now, I'm not particularly against wealth. I'm particular of what that makes people do, how it changes people, how it never is enough, and how they're willing to sacrifice as many other brothers and sisters for them to get even more wealth, and how they want to control the narrative at each stage. And unfortunately, going back to those same kind of vices, those kind of, I would say, evil approaches to spark nationalism, racism, misogyny, all of those things. Something happened just a couple of days to me that I wasn't expecting to happen in Canada, but again, knowing that where we are today, it's not that surprising. I was going to my daughter's house, and I was stopped. I was going to turn left, and there was 2 lanes. And when I just move up a little bit because my lane was open, I see people in 2 cars arguing. Far lane was a man, maybe his 50s, 60s. In closer to me, 2 younger men, obviously looked from Southeast Asia. And I don't know what happened before, right? What led this, but it was kind of a road rage thing, right? And the fellow, the white fellow, was just screaming at the guys, and then started calling them the derogative term for Pakistanis, right? And just screaming kind of insults at the guy. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is not good, right? Maybe the kids did do something wrong on the traffic. Like I said, I don't know what triggered this, but nothing justifies this kind of anger to one another, right? It's sad to see it, and I hope that as a society, we can absorb and push back on those instincts, because we all still carry those instincts with us. Let's not fool ourselves. We are children in this evolution path towards perfection. And sometimes we can have triggers that brings back a lot of these negative behaviors and so forth. And if we see more people doing those negative behaviors, we feel safe to let it go finally. And I hope, like I said, I hope I don't have to witness that again. Not here in Canada, nowhere. I'm going to read a little bit about the other book. I actually bought the book, left it in the car, just to show you. It's called Here and Hereafter by Leon Denis. How many people have read Leon Denis before? Leon Denis, anyone? Hey, Leon Denis. Leon Denis was a Spiritist writer that started. He was there along with Kardec, but he was younger and kept writing books. And he was kind of described sometime as the Allan Kardec for the poor people, because he was more of a normal, more like middle class. Kardec was the intellectual elite. Let's be clear that he was educated. He was recognized. He walked among the intellectual society of Paris, which at the time was the center of intellectual and science in the world. So Kardec started at that level. Leon Denis came in behind him at a more clear level. So the writings are much more poignant the way that Leon, and I do encourage you to read it. So this is a passage from chapter 12, The Purpose of Life. So if you like this lecture, go and look for chapter 12. And he writes, the aim of life is rendered more intelligible. We at least know what we are and whither we go. Henceforth, material pleasure will cease to be our object, and ardent endeavor towards self-improvement will take place. The supreme aim is perfection, the road that leads it to the road of self-improvement. The road is long and progress is infinitely slow. But our destinies are identical. Let's not fool ourselves. Let's not think that we're superior or better than anybody else, because we're all trying to do the same thing differently, different ways, at different levels, with different effort to get there. All must trudge the same tremendous road, and all, despite of 1,000 obstacles, are called upon to share in the same ultimate destiny. So the challenge is what we've been discussing, those trials and tribulations that we're faced. Trials are those things that we choose to face in a new life before we incarnate. It is a choice. Those trials are things that says, oh, this is going to make me better. Like, I want to get some muscle. So my trial is to go to gym every day and get stronger, right? It's a trial for me, but that's a trial. The other ones are more of consequence of cause and effect, things that we've done wrong in the past. And while we have to go through a period of suffering to redeem ourselves, it doesn't mean that, like some other karma, that if you kill somebody means you're going to be killed in this new life. But you have to redeem yourself through good actions, right? So these are the obstacles that we face, some of our own choosing, some that is chosen by God himself, right? Or the spirits that help in this work. And he continues, and this is, again, he's trying to explain this to a whole new audience of Spiritism just before, the world starts to fall apart. Our actual life is therefore the direct and inevitable outcome of our anterior lives. So if you don't like where you are and what's happening to you now, you now know who to blame. It's nobody else, right? We are the architects of our own lives. Not only things we did in this life, which is obviously something that we can see more clearly, I guess, but things that we have done in previous lives. Just as our future life will be the resultant of our present action. So this starts to come into the title of the lecture, How to be Hopeful for the Future. Are you happy about the present? Are you happy? Are you satisfied that you're doing the things that you should be doing? The more you follow God's laws, follows the lessons that Jesus, our teacher, our master, gave to us, the more you're paving the way for a future that's going to be more pleasant, more worthy. If you're not, then you're kind of destined to repeat some of the same issues, same challenges, same trials that you're experiencing now, or even worse. With the law of reincarnation, sovereign justice shines upon the worlds. Each being in possession of reason and conscience becomes the contriver of his fate. And I like this passage here. The soul is a world. We are like a micro world ourselves. Our spirit is a world in which light and shade are still intermingled. Yin and yang, right? Good and bad. It's all within us. It's our choice of which part do we want to improve and which parts we want to let behind. The more closely we study it, the more we marvel. In its folds lie the germs of all power, waiting the fecundating hour to spring forth in sheaves of light. Isn't it beautiful? So, let's start to recap what we've been saying here so far. See, I had another hour of lecture here ready for you. So the first thing we have to understand is the future is not a fixed destiny. It's not been written, right? God has a plan. He shows us the direction. He knows how things will evolve. He will intervene more closely when necessary. But as I said, we have great influence of what's going to happen. It is a consequence of our present choices. So let's make good choices. That's how you get the strength for a better future. And it's not the next 20 years. It's the next 20, 30 incarnations that I'm talking about. Talk about resilience and hope. In difficult times, the thought, this too shall pass, was an important comfort, reminding us that problems are temporary. Right? Things, years, decades, just kind of a blink of an eye in our existence. And this brings us back to the power of starting over. It's never too late to start over. If you made many mistakes, and I'm sure we have made terrible mistakes, that thanks to God's mercy, we don't remember them. Right? Life is full of cycles. We talked about, right? This is just an example. I just picked up on this little time between the time that Kardec was writing Genesis and where we are maybe right now. And we see the cycles, ups and downs. But we all have to see that if you take a bigger picture of centuries, this is still moving society to better places. It doesn't mean that we don't carry that duality that was described before. That we have goodness and we have evilness still with us. The ability to start over after mistake is the fundamental to a better future, as in the famous phrase, no one can go back and make a new beginning, but anyone can start over and make a new ending. So if you feel stressed today, and I do feel stressed because, I'm one who does the doom scrolling sometimes in social media, and it gives me stress, right? But let's assume that we can always believe in a new beginning. Right? It's not as starting from zero, because we're never going to go back to zero. One of the big important principles of the law of progress is that you don't go back. You might stagnate, you might be stuck in a while in a kind of a bad loop, but let's move forward. So you're starting over, and just the fact that you're starting over, you're already a better person for that. Because that means you have recognized your mistakes. And you're willing to at least give it a try. You may not succeed. It might be not easy, right? Your vices, your kind of, your need to repeat the previous cycles might still be too strong. But you can always start over. And God is merciful. Not only because he forgives our mistakes, but because he gives us as many options as many opportunities as we need to fix them. God's timing is also a critical point, right? Because is this the time? Is this the sign of time? This is the change that's going to happen? I always believe that there's no such thing as early or late. There's only God's timing. A vision that events occur at the right time according to a higher plan. This is where faith comes in. We have to have faith that no matter how difficult things might look, that God will always intervene when necessary. He wants us to resolve the problem as much as possible. But if there's a need, and that's why at one time he sent us Jesus to try to give us a better direction, he will do it again. And then evolution of the world. Yes, back to the evolutionary essence of Spiritism. The Spiritist doctrine, through the knowledge transmitted, foresees a future for Earth as a planet in regeneration. I read Divaldo's book on evolution of the Earth. You will see this term regeneration, which is the next phase, past trials and tribulations. A long process that will require the ethical, moral, spiritual, and cultural development of society. I think where we are now is different than when we were during the World Wars 150 years ago. Some of them are good things, because now we have much more of a global community that is talking to each other. The bad part of it is that maybe we don't like the things that we're hearing from this global community, right? Because some of those goodness and bad, good things and good thoughts and bad thoughts, sometimes it brings the worst of people. But those things didn't show up now. It wasn't created because of the technology. It has been promoted and amplified, but it was always there. So in a way, this is the opportunity that we have now to shine a light on these bad ideas, bad thoughts. That we start to see more and more people eventually realize that all of this is wrong. That doesn't lead us to good places. The irony is that often the people who inflict the worst acts are actually the ones that end up worse at the end. It's not even helping them. It's destroying others and destroying themselves. Destroying them economically, sometimes physically, mentally, but most importantly, spiritually. It's giving them more things that they will have to deal with in future lives. In terms of closing the lecture, I cannot give you strength. I can't even give you hope. But you can. Each one of you can find the reasons, the beliefs, to have hope. And with hope, we also mean faith. Faith that we do our part where we can. We do better when we can. We recognize our errors when we can't. And then we will have the strength to push forward essentially what is God's desire. Follow the gospel lessons that we have. Love your brothers and sisters. Restrain yourself from, aggression, from discrimination. Understand that we're all this, as Leon said, we're all looking for the same end. And let's find some consensus and happiness and love through charity. Thank you. Food for thought before food for food. Any questions, comments? Are you more hopeful, less hopeful, or just about the same?
It was something that helped me in tough times. Was very sad in the beginning, but was practice gratitude. The psychologists put these as something that brings more a better view of the future and hope, etc. The beginning was very settled, was very meaningless. But as I started practicing, actually, trying to do like I think was Saint Augustine, right? That mentioned think about three things good on the day, etc. Things that you can be better. These actually help me create more stable. I don't know if I'm getting old too, but it's like I think everybody's getting old. But it's like I think help me to view a better future.
It's an excellent suggestion, and each person will find their happy place. Some of them are through meditation, others through, working more closely with family members, friends, right? Others need time off, need to be isolated and have a little time to think about this. But always remember that this is not your last incarnation, right? Do as best as you can. At least be satisfied that you're trying, and try a little harder every day. Any comments from viewers?
Yeah.
No comments? Any further comments here? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, would you like to do the final prayer? Só esse aqui?
Porque vai fazer os passos.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for being with us, for the people from the internet. And now we are going to do our final prayer and the passes. Thank you.